Hello and welcome to another episode of the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast, the almost Christmas edition. We're going to be taking a deep dive into the Cadillac Vistiq and talking about the dirty underbelly of the Ultium platform, rehashing the Mazda CX-70 and why you should just buy a CX-90 instead, answering some viewer questions, including Subaru versus Toyota versus Lexus. That's kind of an interesting debate there. Mercedes has some new headlights, and then we must talk about the new Fiat Topolino, which was designed to be driven by drunk 14-year-olds in France. So Travis, I think the first thing we should dive into is the reviews of the things we have driven lately or are still in our driveway.
Yeah, you mentioned that you had the Vistiq and you weren't quite sure about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on the Vistiq. I guess it would depend on road tripping performance. If you had an EV that had 300 miles of range, how often would you actually DC fast charge it in your situation?
In my situation, and just for new viewers or returning folks, I do a lot of highway driving, and I drive. Oh gosh, this weekend I drove 400 something miles, and I had to stop and charge my standard range or standard plus range Tesla Model 3 for 15 minutes, maybe 20. Not a lot, right? And that's not. There's no charging in between that until that moment. With a 300-mile car, I'm probably doing about the same. That's 300, assuming 300 highway or right about. But 10, 15 minutes worth, probably all you would end up doing.
Except, of course, the Vistiq charges really slowly.
And when you say really slowly, what do you mean?
So it would take about 45 minutes to gain 200 miles of range in a Vistiq.
Okay.
So it's comparatively glacial, rather unfortunately, which is weird in a way because the AC charging speed is lightning fast in comparison, because Caddy will jam that 19 kilowatt AC charger on it. So at home, you could go 0 to completely full in 5 hours.
Yep, zip.
Which is a lot faster actually than the vast majority of EVs out there, every Tesla included, as far as recovering complete range overnight.
Well, and especially considering the other 19.2s have much, much bigger batteries. We're talking about the big battery Silverado and the Sierra and the Escalade IQ.
It is such an interesting twist because the Vistiq's biggest benefit, and I guess I should back up for those that are not aware of Cadillac's scheme here. So at the moment, Cadillac has 3 3-row EVs and 3 3-row gasoline vehicles on sale at the same time. So we have the short and long wheelbase Escalade in electric and gasoline form, but they're completely unrelated vehicles. Like the gasoline one and the electric one share 0-0. And then we've got XT6, which is effectively being replaced by the end of this year with the Vistiq, which is the all-electric Cadillac, and sort of takes a different place in the lineup and in the competition, because XT6 was relatively quote-unquote inexpensive, running from $49,195 on up to $78,910. So started around the average of a new vehicle in North America, went up there into the luxury world, directly competed with MDX, etc. And now that has been replaced by a Vistiq that is really quite long. So it's 206 approximate inches long, about 8 inches longer than a Lucid Gravity, 7 inches longer than Tesla Model X, 5 inches longer than a Rivian R1S. So it's not a small thing, but way smaller than an Escalade.
It is.
300 miles of range.
Smaller, not just in size, but it's not quite as dense. As
But the basics here are 3.6 seconds 0 to 60, 300 miles of range, efficiency, 3.1 to 3.2 miles per kilowatt hour, et cetera. Decent headroom on the inside. The thing about it, though, and this is sort of its greatest benefit and its greatest problem, is that it shares everything under the skin with all the other Ultium things.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons that we're talking about slow DC charging, is that none of these Ultiums are particularly blazing fast. I mean, when you get the really, really big battery ones, they can get up to 350 kilowatts, which is obviously standard tops, right? And by tops, I mean, this can charge at 600 kilowatts. And it's like, okay, but you can't get to a place that does it. And they'll sell 6 of those in the world this year. It's very much in its prototype, early infancy phase. So 350 is great. what did you top out at with the Vistiq?
About 180 kilowatts, which was
Mm,
below the spec of 190. And that could have been the Charger. Most likely it was, because the weird twist with the Ultium family of things, I wasn't able to get to a supercharger, mind you, and the supercharger
okay.
probably would have performed better because it generally hits at or slightly above the rate on our Blazer.
Mm,
But the problem with Ultium, quote unquote problem, is
sure.
that every Ultium vehicle shares battery modules. And so the battery size is just a function of how many modules did we jam in this thing. Is it, 8 or 6 or 10 or 12 or whatever? And then once you get to Vistiq territory, you got the approximate 100 kilowatt hour battery pack. After that, it's a double stack pack. So the Hummer is a double stack 20 module pack, or a double stack 24 module pack, depending on the full size Ultium that we're talking about. And those charge quickly because they have twice the number of modules, so they can charge at a higher voltage. But like our Blazer is voltage on the battery pack is so low that a 150 kilowatt CCS charge station cannot charge it at 150 kilowatts because it cannot deliver that much current at a voltage that low in
Right.
order to satisfy what the battery needs. So it's kind of an interesting problem there to have. But the counterpoint to this theoretically is Vistiq is going to sell in really small numbers, but and so
True.
will Escalade IQ, etc. But
Right.
in the future, if a module goes wrong, they're replaceable, so the modules can be removed. The dealer can then just stick a new module in, and they can send that other module back to GM for refurbishment and repair, and then it can go
Hmm.
back in the warranty pool. So that's possible. B, it's going to be available because they're all the same. So you roll into the Caddy dealer with your Vistiq that sells like a few hundred units a month, and they've got
Hmm.
a ton of batteries on the shelf because they're also selling,
Optics
60,000
products.
Equinox EVs a year, right? So batteries are everywhere. That kind of is handy.
Yeah.
Although, how likely is that? Probably not.
It's a really long term bet
Yeah.
for sure.
The interior is really nicely done. I did like the interior a lot.
I love the exterior too. It's
Yeah,
just
it's
a
a good
scaled
looking.
down aesthetic
Yeah.
of the Escalade, and I really
Hmm.
like that big boxy look. I mean, and sort of Yukon-ish in that
Hmm.
way as well. But I don't need the full
Yeah.
size. Like, what if you want a 3 row? What
Hmm.
I would call a mid-size 3 row, right? Not a hulking mass. Obviously, it's not light, but you don't need the tank. You
Hmm.
just want 3 rows of vehicle,
Yeah. And it's not related to any Chevy or GMC at the moment, or Buick.
right?
I,
Which
I
is
it
weird, but
Yeah.
good right
I
now.
mean, I would assume that in the before times there was some sort of plan to have a Traverse EV, but that's
Mhm.
probably on hold now. Um,
Sure.
so maybe there was a plan, but at the moment there isn't, and it has this long hood proportion, which I find really attractive. So it has these classic rear wheel drive proportions. I can barely reach the end of the hood standing in front of it. So that hood is longer than the hood on our Durango, which houses a 6.4-liter V8. So it's like it was made for like an inline 8 or something under there,
Yeah.
but no front trunk.
Which is hard to wrap your head around because
Yes.
there's so much room. What are we doing with it? And we talked
So
about it. I
much.
don't. I like a front trunk. I like
Hmm.
the versatility or the weird space you can use it as, but that's the only reason to still have a larger
Hmm.
front end
Hmm.
besides the aesthetic is if
Exactly.
you can do both, cool. If you can't, why are we
Yeah.
wasting this much space?
Exactly. It's like I don't need a front trunk. I'm not like a must-have front trunk person, but if you're going to
Yeah.
give me a hood that's this big, then geez, what's going on in there? And the answer I think comes back to Ultium again,
Mm.
where GM is sharing so many components logically again. Good thing for the Vistiq owner actually, but because
Yeah.
they're sharing so much with Equinox and Blazer and every other vehicle that's on the Ultium platform, that's where all the inverters and chargers and things live, is under the hood, and there was no attempt to massage those components and rearrange them for the Vistiq. So they are laid out very similarly to Lyric and Blazer EV, and they occupy room in a somewhat haphazard form, I would say,
Mm.
under the hood of the Vistiq.
What trim do you have of the Vistiq, or it had?
This is a not fully loaded model, so its price tag was 95,000, not 100,000, where it will go. But it did have Super Cruise. Had the gorgeous blue interior. I'm a fan of blue interiors, I have to admit. Blue and red interiors I like, especially if it's kind of like a burgundy interior. So the
Mhm.
blue interior was calling to me. It had the lovely wood trim. That's all nice. The big screen. Missing CarPlay. So,
Did it have the
Cadillac,
air ride?
it did,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. I think well suited to the vehicle, mind you.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm looking at the website right now, and I'm guessing you had the premium luxury because when
yes, it
they
was
first
premium luxury,
announced
yeah.
they were going to have 5 different trims, and I am only seeing on the website right now 4. So it looks like they might have dropped the premium sport because there's supposed to be luxury sport,
Yeah.
premium sport, and then the platinum.
I think they may have rejiggered the lineup for 2026. That is,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think.
because it is a
Um,
pretty new model to begin with, but I do have to
yeah.
say some of the goodies, especially the visual goodies they put on
hmm
that platinum, made that thing a looker.
Yeah. But like Cadillac giveth and Cadillac taketh away, because the audio system is fantastic. I really like the AKG Atmos systems in the Optic and now the Vistiq far more than I thought I would, because GM's audio systems have been okay. There's nothing wrong. They were in the luxury segment, they were kind of average, I thought. But I think this one is truly fantastic. Like, you loved the one in the Optic, as I recall, correct too? And
Mhm.
you drove the
Yeah,
Vistiq as well.
yep.
But the lack of CarPlay is just insulting, I think. And so
It starts to wear on you, you
I
know?
found myself this adorable little CarPlay display. We're not being
Ooh.
sponsored by anybody, but if anybody is interested in the tiniest CarPlay thing I've seen, there's my iPhone Max on top of it. It's a
Mhm.
4.7-inch screen, and it was only like $35 or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
not bad at all.
that is my
If you
solution.
need if you're willing to go the extra mile and have this weird, obviously non-OEM product sitting in your brand new, very expensive Cadillac,
And it's
Alex has
wired
the solution.
CarPlay. Wired CarPlay.
I'm not sure that's better, but at least it's an option.
Yeah, you could go wireless too. But at any rate, um, the lack of CarPlay is annoying because you got this fantastic Atmos sound system, but you're forced to Bluetooth if you have tunes on your phone. And Bluetooth's audio quality sucks in comparison to CarPlay because it's using a lower bandwidth protocol for the audio side.
Right.
And then you're left with streaming. That's GM's answer is, oh well, you can Atmos, and of course that's the only way actually. Even CarPlay wouldn't support Atmos at the moment, but the streaming services do. So like Tidal, as I understand it, and Amazon Music. Amazon Music's the one this vehicle had for us to test with. But the app is fucking buggy. Like
Yeah.
Amazon Music, I use all the time on my phone. On we have an Android tablet home that we have connected to a whole house audio system. Works
Mhm.
just fine.
Mhm.
Equal opportunity, fantastic app, right? Um, but in the car, really buggy. It kept
Mhm.
crashing. It would give weird error messages that said you couldn't use it while you're driving. The track
That seems
forward
like a
button
big
wouldn't
one.
always work. Yeah.
Yeah, because ideally, it should work especially well while you're driving.
hmm hmm
Um, I don't know how popular Amazon. So I don't use Amazon Music myself. There's a lot of every once in a while I still open up that Pandora if I'm sick of Spotify ads popping up too regularly, and but but I don't know how much it's used in car, and so I'm wondering
hmm
if this is
hmm
sort of a GM integration issue or if this is Amazon resource management saying, well, this is not the top priority. And then obviously with General Motors not allowing you to CarPlay or Android Auto, then it really puts a spotlight, and they want to
hmm
spotlight it because, like you said, this is the way you can do
hmm
the Dolby Atmos, and you go into the system waiting for the coolest audio experience you can find in an automobile, right? That's what Cadillac wants you
hmm
to experience, and then you can't change your songs.
It's like I've said it before, and I'll say it again. As someone that's used to work in more of a tech focused industry, there are some hard truths that people don't always like to hear on both sides of the aisle: Android versus iOS, Mac
Mhm.
versus Windows, etc. Market share is everything. If you're developing an app for general consumption on a desktop or a laptop, what are you going to develop it for? You're going to develop it for Windows first, because that's where the butts are, butts in the seats, right? The eyeballs, maybe is a better way to put that.
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
If you're going to develop a high-end app, then you're actually going to go iOS before Android, because
Yep.
consistency of this ecosystem is higher, and higher higher end smartphones, the market share is very dominant for Apple in English speaking countries. So you're going to be much better off in our neck of the woods here to develop your high end app for your iPhone first, etc. And mid level apps, even because of the consistency of the environment on iOS. You develop it once for the latest build of iOS, it runs on 90 something percent of all Apple phones that are out there at the moment. Then you go towards, Android devices. Then on the tablet side, it's very similar, iOS, then Android. But where is the car in this in terms of volume? It is fantastically small. I mean, the market
Low.
share, GM's combined, Android automotive market share is probably something like a 2-year-old Huawei phone that no one ever heard of, right? In the United
Right.
States. In China, lovely volume. In English speaking countries, low.
Yeah.
So
In all
who's going to
fairness,
get the development resource?
if you're trying to market this, you can say that General Motors holds 85 to 90% of all Amazon Music usage in the automotive space. You're right. Like you can say that, but you got to look at the
Yeah,
numbers and realize that they probably are driving a lot of people
yeah,
towards that function. But
maybe.
that function's got to be ready when they get there.
And it's a little unclear how much GM is involved or has to be involved in some of the app ports. So, the app is going to have to be reported for the screen sizes and any other quirks and eccentricities with that build of Android Automotive,
Hmm.
it to be on the GM app store in for the car. It's very much like an Android phone. It's like the Google releases a new operating system. It's up to Samsung or Huawei or whoever to create a build for that phone and to curate links for approved versions of apps in app stores, etc. And so
Hmm.
it's kind of the same thing in the car, but we're talking, maybe 100,000 Ultium vehicles tops. You talk about every GM vehicle with Google integrated, it's obviously more, but it's still nothing compared to the smartphone market.
Right.
Um,
Now,
this,
I will tell you, there is somebody who's using this Google. So a lot of manufacturers are switching to
mhm,
Google
mhm.
built-in, which I appreciate. Right. There was Alexa built-in, and Alexa, I think, had the market early. I think they did a lot of great advertising. I think you had the Echo devices
Mhm.
in a lot of houses. I know mine had one. I have since switched to a Google interface, and so having Google Automotive built in just makes my life easier. Nissan and Infinity.
So if
I
I were
think
to
they're
just
not.
shout out, "Hey Google, turn off the lights," oh, you're not on a speakerphone. Darn it!
Thank goodness. I got you
Darn
covered.
it!
And you know what? Everybody who's listening who does have a Hey G device is
Mhm,
really happy with
mhm,
you right now.
mhm. Hey
Yeah,
Google,
perfect.
navigate me to Los Angeles.
Uh-huh. Hey Google, subscribe me to the latest episode of Autobuyer's Guide
Oh,
podcast. Right.
oh, that's better.
Um, right. And my phone just tried to do it. So
Oh,
I know because I said it. So Nissan and Infinity are building their own app that goes into their vehicles that they're calling personalized sound. And this is sort of an interesting setup. It's not uncommon for people who are getting brand new higher end or consumer friendly higher end devices. So if you get a Sonos system or you have a receiver and you have your speakers that are all plugged in, you can tune your basically sound settings to your room.
mhm.
In this case, though, it's tuning to you, the driver, the listener. And it's really, honestly, I don't know. I'm not a programmer, but the programming is pretty simple. They're just playing the tunes, and you tell the vehicle when you hit them, and then it adjusts your equalizer based on what you're actually hearing. Because you and I are going to hear the tunes or the tones differently and at different points. So if you want to
Hmm.
actually level out the equalizer, the whole system here is, hey, we're going to create a baseline. The only challenge
Hmm.
there is exactly what we're talking about here with General Motors, which is that works for all of the built-in apps that you're using through your Google Automotive, but it does not work when you're using your CarPlay or Android Auto, which of
Womp
course
womp.
these still do.
Mhm.
So if you do this system and you listen to something really quick on the radio, and when you go, oh, that does sound neat. Well, then you switch over to your other device that you're probably going to use more often, and it doesn't work. I will say you can probably go ahead and adjust the equalizer somewhat based on what
Mhm.
this tested for you. And I think a lot of people won't have done that. It's a great
Mhm.
way to get a
Mhm.
better sound out of your sound system, whether it's an upgraded one or a standardized one. And hopefully people can enjoy their music a little bit better. But here's a really cool idea that only works if you stay in your
Hmm.
system, not using your phone. And so many people like their phones. I'm one of them.
Yeah. Here's another interesting thought or question on Atmos. This is not necessarily Cadillac related. Trust me, we'll get back
Sure.
to the Vistiq in a second, everybody. But
We
uh,
always do.
Atmos itself, um, are you somewhat offended or not at all that the artist does not necessarily decide how the Atmos mix is going to go? Apparently, sometimes they're involved and sometimes they're not, but they're sort of curated, and a mixer dude later goes in, takes the multi-track audio, and then decides where these sounds are going to go in the room that's being created by all the speakers around you, because there's speakers in front of you, beside you, above you, below you, blah blah blah. And so they can move like the hi-hat, here and there, wherever. But is that how the artist originally intended the song? That's an interesting question somehow.
Especially in a world where the artists
Maybe dead.
never had this in
Hmm.
mind because it didn't exist.
Well, that's true.
All right, I've got some mixed feelings on Atmos. Period. So I will try to stay off a soapbox. I'm like a hobby low grade audiophile. Like I really love good sound, and I can go, this is flat, or oh, this is nice, and it works for me. I don't think I love Atmos in most situations because I don't feel like I get to experience the music as a whole. I feel like I'm getting it in different pieces. And there are some
Yeah,
songs that
little
I've
party
heard and
trick to
listened
it.
to that I go like, "Oh, that's neat." And it's
Hmm.
cool
Hmm.
that I'm making it up, right? But let's say you've got your vertical speakers fore and aft, and it alternates, so it goes front right, back left, and then front left, back right. And so let's say you got a little Moroccan, it just and you can hear it shifting around. You go, oh, that's
What
cool.
was it doing again?
You heard me. Uh,
The
and,
dance. The dance is what I was surprised by.
Right. Well,
There's
that's why people need to tune into YouTube.
Yeah.
Uh, anyway, so I think that's a cool feature, and it adds some life to the music, but I don't know if it makes the music better.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of artists who are no longer here, and basically their families, their estates, and I think it's tried to be done respectfully. They bring
Hmm.
someone in, they say, "Hey, we want to remix this in Atmos, and we're going to do it with this different way." And I have studied this artist and the mixer, right? I've studied this artist. I feel like I know what they're going for. What do you think? And generally gets
Hmm.
signed off. Now there are people who are building their songs and their music around this software. I mean, this system, right? And how it exists. But I don't know if I love it. So I've tested it and I go, oh, this is neat and it sounds good. And it pulls some things farther forward that you can't hear a whole lot because they're really isolated in the back. It's overpowered by other sounds.
Hmm.
Um, but
Yeah.
if they've already passed, no, they didn't think about it, period.
Right.
If they're building it now, you can't put too much time and effort into it because this is a new technology, and how long is it until every
Mhm.
Bluetooth speaker is not going to have this,
Yeah.
every you know well, and I mean Bluetooth speaker, now Bluetooth headphones, like you can do a little bit more spatial stuff
Hmm.
with it,
Hmm.
but
And
I
it
don't
is
really know.
interesting that multi-track audio in this way has yet to really go anywhere.
Hmm.
Like there are obviously lossless audio formats available that have multi-channel encoding for Atmos, for instance,
Mhm.
but it's not a lot. I mean, your most streaming doesn't contain the ability for this to happen. Most people don't
Right.
have the equipment to reproduce it at home, mind you, too. So cart before the horse.
Oh, I mean,
But
definitely
but
don't have it at home.
but in a car, actually, most cars have more or less the ability to do this if they cared to,
Yeah.
especially in the quote unquote average segment. $50,000 car is going to have discrete amplifiers for at least 5 channels, usually
Mhm.
6. Um, and so they could do some version of this, but it doesn't seem like there's much there.
I'm curious what the cost, and I don't just mean the cost of the additional amplifiers or the speakers, but putting the name on it, right? What's
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
licensing, the branding, and is
Yeah.
this one of those things where Dolby should actually be trying to incentivize manufacturers to get on board? So here's a discount to get it out there, or are they saying, hey, you got to buy into this? And again, I enjoy that it's out there as an option. There's 2D audio, there's 3D audio, now there's Atmos. It's a whole different scale of these things. I just don't know if I prefer it more.
Yeah, there's obviously going to be some licensing there. I mean, that's been Dolby's thing the whole time.
Yeah.
Licensing Dolby noise reduction, for instance.
Right.
Back to the Vistiq though. So starting at
Sure.
79,090, in the before times it would have had a $7,500 tax credit, mind you, so it
That
could
would
have
have
dropped the
helped.
price lower. But in this world, it's an $80,000 to $100,000 SUV. Would you get a Vistiq or would you get a Volvo EX90?
I get a Hyundai Ioniq 9. Thanks for
Oh,
asking.
oh,
But
not option yet.
but I know. Would I, it's tough because I do have some mixed feelings about Cadillac. I love it on the surface, and then experientially, I think that Volvo is going to be way more interesting to drive. But I say that as someone who just drives myself, and I have a small car, relatively
Mhm,
speaking,
mhm.
and I like a more dynamic driving experience. Not everyone who's got that family that's 3 rows worth of people are trying to have a back road, experience. They're just trying to get there comfortably, quietly. So
And
that one actually
Volvo's,
going to be a
yeah,
bit
and the
harder for
Volvo's
me.
not necessary. I mean, Volvo's still pretty heavy, so they're both 6,000 pound marshmallows. So
Yeah, no featherweights here.
yeah,
But I think the Volvo is going to be way more dynamic, way more interesting to drive. It's a little bit tighter, isn't it? The
it's a little
spatially,
bit. It's
there's not
smaller.
quite as
It's
much
definitely
room.
smaller. Back seat smaller. Third row's significantly smaller.
Yeah.
Because it
So
is
yeah.
not a dedicated EV, even though Volvo would like you to say it is a dedicated EV platform. It's a modified version of the platform the XC90 rides on.
Yeah. So here, my answer is I would go get the Volvo, but then my actual answer is I just get a Polestar 3, which is obviously
Mm,
what the whole
mm,
thing is
mm,
based
mm.
around.
Not
But
a
that
three
doesn't
row,
mean
not an
that
option.
I
Moving
understand that.
along, moving along.
But for the Vistiq, I'll stand up for the Vistiq and say it's not the Vistiq's fault in that one. That's going to be my bias. I think uh, I would rather come out to the driveway and see a Vistiq visually. I
Mm, mhm,
love it
mhm.
sitting
I
in
do
it. I
think the
think it's
Vistiq's
a nicer
prettier.
experience sitting there. The Volvo is a
Mhm.
little bit basic. I
Gotta
don't
move.
dislike
Gotta
it,
move on though. Gotta move on though, because
I
we're
know.
running on 30
We'll move.
minutes. So next up, would you get a Lucid Gravity, bearing in mind that the Gravity can go up to $130,000? So we're only talking about a
Mhm.
relatively low end trim of Gravity.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I like the Gravity conceptually. I've seen too many people talking about too many software issues right now for me to
Mhm,
recommend
mhm.
a Gravity.
It is a little glitchy. Also, the third row, even though the roominess is okay, third row in the Gravity, you definitely are knees in the chest, and it feels like you're sitting, sort of in the road practically. You're really between the wheels a lot because it's quite a bit
It,
lower.
it's
The
not
roof line, I think,
emergency
is
third
about,
row, but it's
yeah,
much more limited.
roof lines, I believe, about 6 inches lower, if I recall correctly, in the Gravity. So it's quite a bit lower. It has that long stretched station wagon vibe. How about Rivian R1S? Bearing in mind that R1S also goes up to $130,000. So for this
Mhm.
price, on the Rivian side, you'd be getting a lower end trim, probably the smaller battery pack, so similar or even lower range in the R1S.
I would probably lean towards the R1S because it's, I think, more interesting. It's more different and in a different one, a way that speaks to me.
How about Model X? Bearing in mind, Model X will start at $100,000, actually just over now,
Mhm.
and will be a two row by default. So you got to add some cash on the hood to get the third row.
I'm not offended terribly by adding that third row, but I would go ahead and get the Vistiq without any hesitation. Mainly because it has regular doors.
Mm-hmm. And here, then the next question is for the same price, because
Mhm.
intriguingly, the top end price of the Ioniq 9 is almost exactly the starting price of the Vistiq after destination. So, would you get a base Vistiq or a fully loaded Ioniq 9
At
for
that
the
point,
same
I'm gonna
price?
yeah. At that point, I think I'm going Ionic 9 with very little hesitation. Again, visually, I the
Mhm.
Vistiq really speaks to me, and it's a nice driving experience. But when you look at so many features you're going to get in that Ionic, and it's also unique experience, and the
Yeah.
fact that it has the same space, all things
It's kind of a
considered.
different blend though, because you do get the
Yeah.
Dolby Atmos system, which I think sounds better even if you're not using Atmos. So
Yes,
you get
better
arguably a better
speakers.
sound system.
Yeah,
You get a much faster 0 to 60 because it's 600 horsepower
yeah,
standard. You get very similar interior room, but you lose
and good
CarPlay.
efficiency still.
Yeah, decent
Yeah,
efficiency, not as good as the Hyundai,
right.
but not too far off. You can get, of course, the AC offload capability as well, with much higher output ability than we get in the Ioniq. Because in the Hyundai, it's hair dryer,
Right.
and in the Vistiq, you can plug into GM's power offboarding widget where you can, I think it's like 9 or 10 kilowatts, something like that. You can offboard.
Right. So I do think that at the base trims, which is kind of difficult, but at the base trims, I think the Vistiq is a really compelling option, especially when you start doing high ends or high ends versus other low ends. I think it's probably a better overall package, but I think I'd still go with the Ioniq 9.
And
It'd
then
be
there's
close.
Super Cruise, of
Close.
course.
And Super Cruise is obviously nice, and because I do so much highway, I would utilize it often. But I don't. I think I'd still stick with the Hyundai
And
for
there
my
you
money.
go. So moving along, we have a viewer question.
So Jackson wants to know about some EVs, but EVs that are very, very similar to each other. Looking at the BZ, formerly the BZ4X or Busy Forks, the Solterra, and the RZ, as they are, per Jackson, essentially all the same car. The Lexus RZ F Sport is compelling, but seems to have a hair less ground clearance, but more features and horsepower. The BZ and RZ seem to have slightly worse turning radius than the Subaru. Where I'm struggling to compare these is the all-wheel drive systems.
Mm-hmm.
Lexus is direct four, air quotes there. Toyota and Subaru have an X mode. I've been told by various salespeople that the power split is different between the all-wheel drive systems, although my aside is salespeople only know what they're told or what they've maybe looked at once or twice. Back here, it says, I found it hard to find information that compares how these systems actually work. Are they full-time all-wheel drive, to all wheels, or only partial? And then I think finally here, the RZ seems to lack off-road modes and has reduced ground clearance. It's a sportier experience. That's what they're going for. The Subaru seems to be best choice for light off-road. To complicate things, sometimes the off-road mode turns off over certain speeds, like the RAV4 does. Is that the case for these models? And finally, they currently have an Outlander PHEV, so very similar to the one that we used to have. And it seems to be the all-time all-wheel drive and off-road mode, work at all speeds, but it does lack power. And after time, I've sort of started to wish I just went all electric. So thank you, Jackson. And we'll leave that other last bit for later, because if you get a plug-in hybrid, you've just gone all electric in the first place. But Alex, we've got three vehicles that not everyone is shopping for: BZ, RZ, and Solterra. Initial
Yes,
thoughts?
we have found the BZ RZ Solterra shopper. And if you want to send us your questions, you can email us your voice memos or your questions to hey@autobuyersguide.com. That's HEY@autobuyersguide.com. Or you can give us a jingle on the phone at 669-842-1947. But the short answer here is that they all have the same all-wheel drive programming. And that's something that actually Toyota talked about, that all the traction management work was done by Subaru on this platform. So Toyota was the lead development in some core areas, and Subaru was the lead developer in other core areas. Traction management was Subaru's side, the off-roading capability and all that jazz. Toyota was the lead development on batteries and motor systems and inverters, and then there was collaborative development on dimensions and where the seats should be and that kind of stuff. So the short answer there is marketing is the difference. You were correct in that Lexus does not offer, as I recall, a specific off-road mode in RZ, but if we're talking about the way that the motors are going to work and function, it's going to be basically the same in Direct 4 versus the other systems. And the X mode in BZ and Solterra are absolutely identical. That is the 100% same software. And Toyota admitted basically that they were just too lazy to rename it, so they just called it X mode. As far as off-road system functionality in higher speeds, pretty much all off-road modes turn off at higher speeds, unless we're talking about more dedicated off-road vehicles like 4Runner, Grand Cherokee, Land Cruiser, etc. Those systems, the software side may have an upper speed limit, but obviously the hardware side doesn't. If you're in 4 low, there's no way to electronically turn you out of 4 low if you go faster than you should in 4 low. Which is part of why these electronic systems work the way they do. They also, the main reason that they disable over higher speeds is that they fiddle with the way power is sent and the way that the system recognizes and deals with wheel slip, and you just wouldn't want that at higher speeds. The BZ and the Solterra, at least the last ones that we drove, mind you, unless there's been a software update, re-enable at lower speeds. So you hit X mode, you're in there, you go over the speed, it turns off, you go back under the speed, it turns back on. So the setting is persistent, which is quite logical if you're in snow, etc. As far as functionality, it's not really going to be that far off your Outlander, to be honest. Two motors, open differential. It's always going to have a particular and somewhat peculiar feel in snow. That's just the way that these things work. Without the ability to make sure that the front wheels and rear wheels are spinning at the same speed, the system is depending on the brake-based traction control system and just reducing power or increasing power here and there to try and make them spin at approximately the same speed. Which is why, if you were talking about, capability, generic maximum capability off-road, a mechanical locking setup like you'd find in a Bronco or a Wrangler where you have 3 lockers, front, rear, and center, that's going to be the most capable in general terms. And everything else falls below that. Almost all EVs are somewhere in the realm of behaving like a system with an open differential front and rear. Even the 4-motor systems that we find in the G-Wagon and in the Rivian lineup, you're going to get a lot of wheel slip before something engages because there's no other way for the car to know what's going on.
Yeah, I will say that if you do a lot of slushy driving, and the way I read this, the questions about all-wheel drive systems, my first thought with people looking for all-wheel drive is they're not looking for rock crawling, locking differentials, that sort of thing. It's just general traction. None of these are going to be, even if there's a little bit more slip before it engages, all of these responses are lightning quick. I mean, milliseconds before they are ready to engage. I don't think I have any serious concerns between any of them, except for maybe even just the tire selection. And that would come down to, that RZ is not likely to have as all-terrain of a tire as you'll find in the BZ or the Solterra. But if you really do use these vehicles in slushy driving scenarios, you might not want to be looking at that factory tire at all. That might be something that when it comes to fall and winter, you're already swapping out to more of an all-season or an all-weather tire even before you worry too much about those different drive modes. But the RZ is going to have less ground clearance. It's going to be more fun and interesting to drive. It does have a little bit more power to it. But again, if you know that you live off the beaten track, you drive some gravel roads and you go, oh, I'm a little bit worried about it, probably just tuck the RZ aside. It's also going to be pretty expensive for what it is. To my mind, I think it's an incredible lease if you can get a great deal on it. It's a nice car, but I wouldn't spend too much more on it than a BZ or a Solterra. And at that point, I appreciate that those two models do have more differentiation visually than they used to. So you can actually essentially pick which one you like the way it looks better, or again, chase some incentives depending on what they're running that month.
Now we should switch gears and move on to the news. There was a news article out today saying that Mercedes is now ditching glue and going back to screws in certain car modules. So their headlights that were formerly all glued together are now going to be repairable because you'll actually be able to unscrew everything and then replace some parts inside. They are also promising that door panels and other interior components are going to be done with either screws or other kinds of fasteners, or maybe some pop rivet style things that can be removed and replaced to not only make car crash repairs a little easier in the case of the headlight, but to supposedly improve recyclability.
So that my first thought here, interesting news. What do you think Mercedes' key goal is here? Because you can do just about whatever you want with a headline, and I love putting an interesting spin on just pieces of information. To the consumer, probably sounds good, but what's Mercedes' win here?
I'm guessing it's a marketing angle at the moment, but I am intrigued by the possibility of crash repairs being less expensive. Headlight modules and taillight modules are becoming increasingly pricey because there's so much more going on inside these modules now, especially as customers are demanding, the animated startup light sequence on the DRLs and the tail lights, etc. These modules become really expensive. And if you're in a minor fender bender and just the lens is cracked, but the electronics inside the module are still good, then being able to replace the plastic is kind of a good idea.
Yeah, and I think there's probably an argument. I don't know exactly which way it goes, but some of these glues or commercial adhesives are not particularly great to be working their way back, not just in production, but back into the world through through the garbage pile. So screws are a little bit, more of a known entity there, and a little bit easier to control. They can be back and recycled depending on what specific material they're made out of. But here's where I run into an issue is that we were at Honda a few weeks ago for celebrating their 50 years of Honda, and they showed some really cool showcases on some of the new technologies and the approaches they're exploring for things like interior design. And there was this emphasis on recyclability. And they said, if we do, they're talking about seats, right? And we do this material can be recycled and renewed and brought back. And I said, you know what happens to seats when the car is done? They get crushed. So it sounds great that there's a second life in there in the material, but it just sounds like marketing. I think it's cool, but people aren't stripping down these cars going, what can we recycle? They're going, what can we sell for scrap metal? And that little plastic component that's now 3D printed that can be recycled is not ever going to hit the recycler. So that's where I'm at
the
a little
curious
bit.
part, because there would have to be, the evil word government mandates that would somehow require recycling to make it actually work.
Yeah, and you know what? There are lots of things that have government mandates, and I'm maybe not the biggest fan of the man as this overarching thing, but there are things that wouldn't have happened without it, and we're probably better on the back end of it. I would love for cars to have a gentler life after they're done. Can we go in? Can we reuse these parts? Can we melt these down instead of just this real quick? Okay, here's the thing we can immediately use, and everything else goes to dump. Sounds great. It's not happening right now. If you're putting materials into the vehicle right now that are more sustainably sourced or come from recycled materials, that's going to be the long-term win. Even right now, I've got a can. This can has a beverage. It's not plastic. That only means something if I recycle this. Otherwise, it ends up in that same trash heap. And then, of course, obviously, a lot of stuff that we put in the recycle bin ends up in a trash heap anyway. So not to be.
Fortunately, aluminum is highly recyclable and highly recycled. So,
right,
not so for plastics.
One of the reasons why I have this can.
Because even if it does end up in the landfill, at least you could go back through the landfill and remine the metals out of the landfill.
Yeah.
Plastics, that's just a lot harder, a lost cause basically, to try and troll through the trash, a decade later and try and reclaim anything.
So if nothing else, if it's cheaper, and that means that vehicles are going to get repaired instead of totaled, awesome. I'm on board. I'm just curious what Mercedes gets out of it.
Yeah. We now must shift gears, metaphorically speaking, because this has no gears, and explain the Fiat Topolino, which is coming to America. And I saw some interesting news articles saying basically, Trump has allowed the K car to come to America. See, here you go. Fiat's bringing the Topolino to the U.S.
I love marketing.
There are a few problems with this. The first one being it was announced before the weird press conference. Second, that it's not a K car. And that third, it's not going to be street legal.
Listen, here's what the headline is. Besides Trump brings K cars, is Fiat is back. They are doubling the models available for sale here in the United States. That is a big move in the automotive world. It's just that this isn't really a car in what most people would consider a car.
It is technically a quadricycle.
A really, really, really cute quadricycle.
It is adorable. I will admit that. It's also teeny tiny. It's 95 inches long, meaning it is shorter than the wheelbase in a two-door Wrangler. My side-by-side is bigger than this thing. But we also have to explain why it exists in the first place, because the Fiat Topolino is just a Citroën Ami, and it was rebadged for Fiat. Why, God knows. But it exists because of France and France's particular and peculiar laws there. So because it's a quadricycle and it has an 8-horsepower electric motor, top speed 28 miles an hour, so God knows, it's going to be slow everywhere. When you're in Florida at the beach golf course thing, and you're driving it from, why would you not drive your golf cart? But if you're driving this instead of the golf cart, or maybe it is the golf cart. I don't know. If you're
Hmm.
doing this in the places where golf carts are allowed, or those low speed electric vehicles like the old electric gems, if you remember those, same kind of rules would apply here. 28 miles an hour maximum, about 45 miles of range, something like that, weighs 1,000 pounds. But the reason it exists is if you're in France and you're born before 1988, you can drive one of these widgets with no driver's license, or better, a suspended driver's license. So
Mm.
if your drink driving list is long enough that your license has been taken away, you can get yourself behind the wheel of a Citroen Me, and you can just, you know, you and your mon ami
Cut your way
can,
along.
yes, can drink while you drive. Actually, there's still
You know,
still rules around it,
sure.
but it is one of
Yeah.
those weird like loopholey almost things. And if you're over 14, you can get a special AM license to drive one at 14 years old, basically.
So where I live in the greater township, you can drive a side by side on the road. It has to
Hmm.
meet certain qualifications. Obviously, none of those are test ratings. They are, do they have a license plate? Do they there's some sort of, can they pass an emissions, and do they have blinkers and a mirror? After that, you're good to go. I have a hard time understanding why I would get a Topolino and not a side
Yeah.
by side in that situation, because that side by side is going to be a lot more exciting to drive. Not as
Oh yeah.
cute,
Oh yeah.
but way more exciting, and
I
probably very similar in
probably
price.
probably the similar in safety too. I mean, the AMI, at least it was designed to be fully enclosed, not like most side by sides where it's like, oh, there's some add-on doors and whatever, and it doesn't weather seal as well. I mean, side by sides with doors, generally speaking, because there are exceptions, but generally speaking, they're not as watertight as a car. There's a the
Right.
expectation is gonna be water rolling around here and there. The Mi's cute. At least it's super cheap in Europe because it has so few things going on. I mean, it's such a basic interior. The
Yeah.
doors are even the same. The right and left doors are the same. And you need to think about that for a second because they're
Yeah.
hinged on the same side.
Mhm.
So the driver's door is a suicide door. The passenger door is not a suicide door because they're the same door and they're hinged on the other side.
Right.
Headlights, tail lights in the same location because the front and rear bumper are the same bumper. They just changed the lights from white to red. So
Yeah.
it is an exercise in efficient construction, and it's
Love
basically
it.
just two bumpers and two doors.
Love it. I mean, there's no reason for it
Yeah.
not to be. It's filling a need. It's a obviously a very niche need.
Hmm.
I would love to see more of it. Uh,
But who's
I
gonna? That's like it's like where would this work? I mean, I don't. It would never work in San Francisco because it could probably never climb a hill. It's
it
not going to
depends how
work in
torquey it
Houston
is.
because you'd get run over by an F-350 that didn't even see you. I mean, they'd
Yeah,
be,
at
oh,
least
what
the
was that
Waymo's would
bump?
stop.
You know. So it's like where is the where for that? I don't know.
How many they're planning to bring, and what I don't have. I mean, maybe you have the numbers in advance here. How many of these golf cart for the retirement village are sold in the U.S.? It's not a huge amount. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I do know folks who live in an area where golf carts are just as viable on the street in, in the township area as a regular car, and people prefer it for some reason. I'm not totally sure why. I just go get yourself a Fiat 500, and that's cute and easy to drive and whatever else. But I go with a side by side, and in this case, I go with an electric side by side. Obviously, it's probably going to be more expensive, but way more interesting. I can do more things with it. But what else is out there? There's these other niche vehicles that just
Hmm. Hmm.
haven't really. They either aren't quite here yet physically, or they just didn't really land. Aptera is another one of these,
Hmm.
electric. Ooh, what is this? It's a
But at
different
least
thing,
a
but
that's a drivable on a regular road car,
it is.
supposedly.
It is. There's another small one that I saw, and I can't remember. Oh, Electromechanica. I
Oh
cannot
yeah,
remember
yeah.
the name of
They
that
went
thing.
bankrupt as I recall. The Corbin, they started as the Corbin Sparrow once upon a time.
Yeah,
I kind of wanted one at one point. I think I had a
they sell them. They
deposit
sold
on
them
the
in
original
malls.
one.
I saw them
Yeah,
in malls a bunch, but that didn't really seem to
but
stick either. That one
those are
could do
registered as a motorcycle, so still legal to drive in all these other
right,
places because they're more
right.
of a motor car thing.
Three
This
wheels,
falls
right?
into this weird world where like Oahu, you could drive a gem on Oahu. You could rent them once upon a time. I'm going back like at least 25, 30 years.
Or a
I
moke.
rented one at some point in time, and I have a friend actually that lives on Oahu that probably would love an Ami, but the price tag is the problem. She just keeps buying whatever used Honda Fit she can find.
Sure. I
But like
mean,
she's the kind of
it's a
person that
great.
doesn't go very far, doesn't go very fast.
Yeah, and you can do a moke and an emoke.
Hmm.
Those are also options that seem to fit the vibe, right? Although if you're going for, you have to want the Jeep look.
Hmm. Hmm.
I love that it's here. I'd love to see it. I'd love for a little town to pick it up, and that's, I don't know, it's a little mail carrier to that three houses somewhere, or the bakery when they do deliveries to
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
Not in mass, but why not? Why not make cars more interesting?
Yeah, but it's so tiny, the local French bakery would be able to deliver one baguette to you, and that would take up the entire cargo capacity of the Ami.
Where's the creativity, Alex? Where?
Two croissants,
Yeah,
one baguette. That is
you,
all
you
that
know,
it will accommodate.
it'd be great. Do you remember the? I mean, you will, but do you remember
Because
the
that's
Domino's
all.
Chevy Sparks with
Yeah,
the built-in
yeah.
oven? Just bring that concept back.
Sure, 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 sure. But this was designed for the French diet, which means it only needs to accommodate a baguette and a case of cigarettes. That's all that goes
Bottle of
in there
wine fits
because
in the door
that's
cup
all.
holder or
Yeah.
something like that.
What's a wine bottle holder and then storage for your single baguette and a case of cigarettes. That's how it goes.
Yeah. Do you
And
think we'll get
sorry,
one to
sorry
test?
to our French viewers who have just canceled. Sorry.
Do you think we'll be, nothing but love here? Do you think we'll be able to get one to test out? I mean, I live in an area where I could
I'm gonna go with
make that
probably
work.
no. I'm gonna go with
Hmm.
no.
Okay. Then how are the people going to know about it?
I would not be surprised if they did some weird event combined with something else where they were like, "Hey, here's a parking lot. You can drive a Topolino if you want to. Well, we
Mhm.
also distract you with a Ram over here on this side."
Listen, Stellantis, we're on board. I'm
Yeah,
on board, if nothing else.
I'm intrigued. I just want to know why. Like, why
Okay.
is this the thing, and why instead did we not bring a Fiat Grand Panda, which I think is actually fantastic.
Mhm.
Um, and looks good, decent hybrid options, etc. Like, can we not just work on something that would sell?
Okay, silly question. Topolino or the
I think you probably have to
also,
say Topolino.
well, okay, I'm not trying to get too canceled today. It's 26 hasn't started. I'm just
I'm
trying to
gonna
end
go
the
ahead and
year
guess that's
nice and safe.
probably closer to how it's supposed to be, but okay.
Would you go with the Topolino or one of the also quad cycles that has like the little cargo box on it, and
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
and you can pedal it, but it's going to be able to be powered without it. And I think max speed on that is supposed to be 25 or 23, so essentially
Yeah.
the same thing. Which would you go with?
It depends on where you lived,
Mhm.
and how exercisey you want to be at that particular time. Neither
Yeah,
one would work for me where I am. I couldn't go any literally, I could
no,
not go anywhere in it. So that
I
that
could get
just
into town, but
non-starter.
not quickly. So, but I think again, it sounds strange. I think I'd go with that also. Again, assuming the four wheel models that aren't currently out, but they look like they have enclosed setups for delivery, and you can put
Mhm.
stuff or people in the back. And it's a more engaged. You're in a bicycle stance, but it's a pretty relaxed bicycle
Mhm.
situation.
Mhm. So you just
But
wanna
it's
be a
gonna be
pedicab
smaller and
driver.
more interesting. And hey, listen, when retirement hits, you never know where I end up.
So you're gonna be doing one of those beer pedicabs in Seattle?
You'll find me down by the stadiums, and I'll
Okay.
be getting you to and from your parking spot to the game. Whatever you
Okay.
need. Hmm.
So if you wanna see Travis in bicycle shorts, everyone, you've gotta wait 20 years. He's gonna be retired. He's gonna be,
Ooh, 20
doing
sounds
doing the
great.
pedicab.
20 years sounds great. Yes, sign me up.
He may not look as good then in the bicycle shorts
Mm,
as he might now. So there you
you
go.
never know.
There's that.
You never know.
Um, Moving along, we touched on this a little bit last week, but I'm still somehow offended by the CX-70
Mm,
and
hasn't
its
left
ex-
you yet.
its its existence somehow.
Okay.
Uh, and we dug further into this. It is less expensive than CX-90. I know there's some reporting out there that implies it's more expensive than CX-90. That's not correct. Like for like, it is $700 less. So there's a bit of a save on the deletion of the third row.
The seats,
Um,
yeah.
it starts in a higher trim, so base to base, it is $6,000 more, but that's
Right.
not comparable to comparable. The
And
thing
you're
I
probably not losing any sales there, really.
Yeah, the thing I just don't understand is why is it not sold as simply CX-90 Sport,
Hmm.
but also the further we dug deep down in that cargo area pit rabbit hole, the more disillusioned I became because there are and have been in the past full-size SUVs with two-row options, most notably Ford and the Expedition had a two-row option.
Hmm.
I don't know if they still do anymore. I believe that's gone. But the Durango also has, from time to time, offered a two-row variant. And there, what they do instead of the third row is there are storage compartments, usually with separate doors. And the Durango is kind of like a bifold barn door widget. And then you had access to this actually quite large storage area because that's where the seats would go. Somehow in the CX-70, although you do get a little bit of extra storage space, it's, I don't know, the size of like two of these charge adapters, and maybe you could fit a tripod under there. And
Yeah.
most of the area has been occupied by this enormous piece of foam, huge, huge, huge piece of foam, um, and no separate doors. So you got to lift up the load floor and pull the whole thing out to get to this area in its own right.
Hidden space, yeah.
And it just seems like such a wasted space if you're going to go to the trouble of calling it a CX-70. More should have been done, or indeed less should have been done, and it should have just been a CX-90.
So here's my question. Does it make sense to have, instead of calling it a CX-90, do you just go CX-70 and CX-70 Sport? Do you think the 90 is what family is going to be looking for because the bigger number means the more space? If you had to pick a model, you had to pick the
Yeah.
name. Does 90 make more sense for families than you have the 90 Sport?
I don't think it matters that much. I don't think any big families are really going to be choosing CX-90 anyway. Yes, it does have an
No.
eighth seat available, but it is fairly small inside compared to other SUVs with similar exterior dimensions. Grand Highlander is like a whole other dimension bigger inside, for instance.
Yeah.
Ditto
Not as sexy.
Palisade, Telluride's big, etc.
Yeah.
It is nice inside, but it's intrinsically compromised passenger wise the same way that a Grand Cherokee L is or a Durango is because of the rear wheel drive design. So bigger hump in the second row, higher floor in the rear, notably more transmission tunnel intrusion in the front, smaller storage compartments. It was funny that at the launch of the CX-90, this is diverging from CX-70 a bit, but the launch of CX-90, Mazda was very proud because they're like, well, we surveyed our customers, and our customers said that one of their top complaints about CX-9 and top reasons they left Mazda and got a competitive product instead of trading their CX-5 in for a CX-9, one of the big reasons they cited was lack of center console storage and the fact that it was bulky there, etc.
Okay.
So they said they improved it, but they didn't improve it to actually be competitive. It's better than CX-9, but it's not
Right.
competitive with insert any of those other options there because the transmission has to live somewhere, and that's the somewhere.
Right. And and because this is, rear wheel drive base system, then it has that distinct disadvantage. Did they win any customers back in
Mhm.
making that change? And I'm just trying to figure out. We can sit here and we're kind of jokingly offended by this because who cares? But I'm wondering why do a whole different brand? Why
Yeah.
do not model, not brand, but different model? Why do a
Mhm.
CX-70 and a CX-90 instead of just having a sport model or a
Yeah.
CX-70 family trim?
It
And
mostly seems like a bad business decision. Like, how much money did it cost to call it a 70 instead of a 90 and have a separate advertising campaign, separate part of the website, separate everything, when you
yeah.
could have just been like, hey, new $700 cheaper CX-90 Sport with no third
Or
row?
or has it worked? That would be the numbers. Has it made an impact? Is somebody who wants a larger, a sveltier lifestyle vehicle? They don't want a passport. They want it to be good looking at work, and they can take it up to the slopes. And they say, I don't want a CX-90. That's a
Mhm.
family car. I want a CX-70. I love it, but again, just that name would turn them off because it's not exciting enough. It's just a little bit too domestic.
Well, we can answer this question because CX-90 is not flying off the shelves. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
They sold 44,000 through October
Okay.
in the United States, and they sold 12,000 of the CX-70s, and it was a full year of sales on the CX-70, which means
Yeah.
CX-70 is selling 1/10 of what a Subaru Outback is selling. Ostensibly a competitor, very strange competitor, but that's what
Yeah.
they're claiming it is, that it's a mid-sized two-row thing. So Blazer, Passport, 4Runner, Grand Cherokee,
Outback.
that segment is what they're saying this is.
Hmm.
It's an odd one there. But because the problem also is that the second row seat doesn't move backwards. And when we're looking like Atlas Cross Sport versus Atlas, or Passport and Pilot,
Hmm.
not only do they look a bit different because they changed more, they changed actual structure of the vehicle, but usually the second row moves rearward, giving you more room. A three-row vehicle has a lot of compromises because you have to have a usable third row, and so that usually means the second row slides or the second row is positioned in a way to just make the third row work. If you don't
Yeah.
have a third row, why do that? You can move that second row back and have more room.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, it's a quarter as popular as the CX-90, which does make sense. And
Hmm.
you and I said we would get the CX-90, just keep the seats folded.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
and
the
that,
real
that
answer.
that is what I would do. I'm trying to remember, and I did a quick look here. Does the CX-70 have darker accenting trim
It
rather than
does.
lighter? And
Yes, it's a
and
little
so
less
that's
chromy.
yeah, and that would be my preference. But what I could also do is take it to any shop and have them wrap those pieces in the exact color of not exactly chrome I was looking
Mhm,
for,
mhm.
and spend a little bit more. But I would probably be the person that says that's worthwhile.
Yep.
Yeah, and they have good powertrain options, eh, but
It
also the
has been a
CX-70
bit
isn't an
buggy.
established. It's not an established name, so I'm not
Mhm.
saying it's going to catch on. Don't worry, guys. Bet big on CX-70, but an Outback is definitely an established name, and it's going to draw a
Yeah.
bigger group. There are people who know about it, even if they don't know cars. They might have heard of a CX-9, maybe the CX-90, but a CX-70 not as much.
And I think some of Mazda's core audience here is having a tiny bit of shopper's regret on CX-70 and 90. When we look at Consumer Reports data, they haven't fared well, and I don't know how much of that is a true reliability problem and not, because
Mhm.
CX-70, 90 don't use a DCT, a dual clutch transmission. They use a regular automatic, but they use a regular automatic without a torque converter because a full hybrid system is standard. Mazda technically calls it a mild hybrid. In the truest sense of the word, it is a full hybrid. It is a mild full hybrid, but it is able to drive without the engine running, and it has an electric air conditioning compressor, so that puts it in the technical full hybrid bucket. But it has a very small battery, so it doesn't do a lot of electric motion. The motor is there mainly to extend the idle start stop, to enable it to smooth out shifts because it doesn't have a torque converter. So it uses the motor to drive electric only for the first few miles an hour. And then you have the clutch close, and then the engine can take over. So that low speed stop and go crawl type situation is mostly electric motor with a little bit of clutch slip. And that can be a little herky jerky like some old DCTs. And I wonder if that's why customers are saying it's unreliable in the Consumer
Mhm.
Reports data. Are they complaining about shifts and whatever, which is what you see in the
Right. Isn't
notes
it an
there?
experience thing versus a
Right. Yeah. Is it a feel thing or an
mechanical
actual
fault?
problem? Because
Yeah.
people don't like the way ZF's 9-speed shifts, but it doesn't seem to be a true mechanical problem. It's a flavor
Doesn't mean it's
issue.
broken, it's just a preference.
Yeah. And ditto for, Mercedes MCT transmission, the multi-clutch transmission thing it's their answer to a DCT, but it's just an automatic without a torque converter, kind of like this in a
Yeah.
way. And it's herky jerky for exactly the same reasons because it's opening and closing the clutch. I also kind of wonder, just sideways, if CX-70 and 90 give up a little bit of performance because of this particular transmission style. In a 0 to 60 run, you definitely notice you floor it, you get off the line, and there's like, wait for it, clutch closes, engine actually can give you the torque that you're expecting, and off we go, which is probably why the heavier plug-in hybrid is actually quicker, even though it produces
Right.
less power and is heavier. because its bigger motor is just giving you more shove in that first, half a second than you can get in a regular gasoline CX-90.
It's also not the most comfortable ride. It's more of a
Hmm.
tighter tuned experience,
Yeah.
and I know not everyone's going to lean that direction, especially as vehicles get bigger. That's where I have a bit more difficult time is, again, the car for the need. And if you're
Hmm.
like, I want my Porsche 911, but I have to move my family around, so I would get a Porsche Cayenne. Great, that sounds awesome. Not everyone's out buying a Porsche Cayenne. And so is a
Hmm.
CX-90 or a CX-70 a budget Cayenne? Well, it doesn't really give the performance that the
Yeah.
suspension might lend itself towards. So there might be a little bit of a mismatch there. I do think this
Hmm.
would do a whole lot
Or,
better as
or
something more like, okay,
is
all
it
right,
a,
go ahead.
or is it a Japanese Durango?
Mm. Ooh, interesting. I'm not going to ask Mazda. You can ask Mazda. I
And I
don't think
say
that's
that
a question.
because CX-90 and CX-70 both have a somewhat peculiar feel in the rear suspension. They feel heavy, and the rear end feels like it's lifting a little bit when you're driving it harder in the corners, in the same way that Durango has that exact same feel. Like the base Durangos with the regular steel spring suspensions, etc., they have the exact same feel. But because it's rear wheel drive, if you dig deeper into the throttle, the rear end kind of does settle down and does its thing. But it does have this like interesting, rear end lift. I think it's a spring rate thing in the back. Kia Stinger had the same sort of thing going on once upon a time with it as well. It does not feel quite like an Explorer. Explorer is a little bit more composed in the rear, and Grand Cherokee L is a little bit more composed in the rear. Um, but it's fun. It's got big tires, and it is fun to drive. It is genuinely more fun to drive than Highlander or Telluride or Palisade or anything else, and it's pretty quick too. I mean, 0 to 60 in 6.3 is not a slouch for a mainstream vehicle.
But I feel like it would do better in the Outback Crown Signia body style. I feel like it would especially something like the CX-70 shopper
Hmm.
who is looking for some space, obviously, and more of a premium look and feel with without sacrificing too much. I wonder if it would almost do better as one of those pseudo station wagons. Obviously, you can't do a 3-row version of that. We're
Hmm.
not talking about a Lucid Gravity here, but I don't know.
What
We're
would
not
have
going to
done
see it,
even
but
what would have done
mine's
even
one
better
of
though is a CX-60, because they already
60.
have
Yep.
it. It exists in Europe. It is all
Uh-huh.
kinds of fantastic. Basically, the same drivetrain kind of deals there, but it is smaller. I think that Mazda thought that it was too close to CX-5 in size, but I
Right.
would have thought the right
Well,
thing to do
CX-5
here,
and CX-50.
yeah, would have been to ditch CX-50, just bring that CX-60 to America instead, and have a small, fun rear-wheel drive thing, because that would be truly unique. We oddly enough have more rear-wheel drive options in this segment than we've had in a long time, because we have the Durango, the oldest, so old, right? And then
Not new, but still
it was
there.
if it theoretically existed because they didn't want a 3-row Grand Cherokee. Now we have a 3-row Grand Cherokee, so that's number two.
Correct.
Explorer in this generation went back to rear-wheel drive, so that's three. And then now we have CX-70 and 90 here as the mainstream rear-wheel drive options, which is kind of cool. But in the
Mhm.
next size segment down in the mainstream, there are zero.
0. Hard 0.
Yeah.
And in the next
So
segment up, it's most of them. So, yeah, it's sort of
yeah.
an interesting middle ground.
And so it's like that this CX-60, I mean, they look adorable in Europe. But
Mm.
it's like CX-60 is sort of that, I want an X3, but I can't quite afford it, and I want a bit more room. CX-60,
Yeah,
there you go. Inline
yeah.
six, fantastic, etc. Just sad that they feel it's not for us.
I know, but Alex, I think we are wrapped up here just about on time. I've got one last question for you. We always love questions from the viewers. What do you think about off topic questions? We sit here and talk a lot about cars, but I know in our YouTube comments, we get a lot of questions about us, little offhand
Mm.
this, or
Hmm.
did
Hmm.
Travis
Hmm.
say that? Did Alex mention this? What are you open to a ask me some things, not an ask me anything, if viewers are looking for that as part of our end of year wrap up?
I mean, they can always ask. It doesn't mean that we're going to respond, but ask away,
But
as I always
if
say.
we get enough, we can have a small segment or a longer segment on one of our episodes here to end the year. So give us a call, shoot us a message, or an email at hey@autobuyersguide.com.
It is entirely possible. See all of you later.